Hi, it's Keith from the Evangelical Free Church, Stony Stratford, and we're continuing our series of short talks in the Gospel of Luke. And today we're looking at Luke chapter 21, verses 5 to 11. It's certainly been a very eventful visit to the temple for Jesus and his disciples. It started with him driving out those who were exchanging money and trading in the temple courts. He was then asked about what authority he had to do this, and he answered it. He was then given a political question and then a theological question, both with the intent of trying to catch him out. But they didn't. In the end, he's pretty much free to talk and to teach because no one has any guts to ask him any more questions. But as they're leaving the temple, the disciples start to draw his attention to the buildings. Verse 5, some of his disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. The temple had been refurbished, or a term they used is beautified, by Herod the Great. Herod the Great had done it to try and sort of gain some favour from the Jewish people. He wasn't very well liked before he did it, and he wasn't very well liked afterwards, as he was a complete tyrant. But no doubt it was a magnificent building. But the disciples get a reply from Jesus they were hardly expecting. End of verse 5 and verse 6. But Jesus said, "As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown down." That would have taken his disciples back. You know, some time ago I was on the high street and I got talking to someone about the Bible, and they raised a series of questions. And when I started to answer one question, they said, "No, I want you to answer it just in a yes or a no." And I said, "No, I'm not going to do that, because one has to take the teaching of the Bible in the Old Testament, its context of how Jesus teaches it in the New Testament." I pointed out there were many more facets to an answer than just a yes or no. And what happens next is very much that kind of thing. Jesus has told them the temple will be destroyed. Now, rather interestingly, in Mark's Gospel, Mark 13, verse 3, if you want to look it up, they're on the Mount of Olives at this point, and Jesus is sitting where he could have overlooked the temple, and just four of his disciples, Peter, James, and John, and Andrew, approach him. Now, you really get, I think, the awkwardness there. They've been very perturbed by what he said, and you can almost imagine them nudging each other and saying, "You ask him about it. No, you ask it. I'll tell you what, we'll do it all together." And so they come to him and they ask, when are these things going to happen? And basically, how will we know when they're going to happen? Because they're so shocked. You see, the people of Israel could not imagine Jerusalem without a temple. To them, it seemed like the temple was a very dwelling place of God. In Ezekiel, there's a point where God's glory leaves the temple. That was unthinkable. So really, when you talked about the temple being destroyed, it was like the Jewish world coming to an end. Everything sort of tumbling into oblivion. This was like the end of the world where they were concerned. So Jesus starts to answer their question, and we'll be looking at it over the next few weeks. And the first thing he points out is that there will be many false teachers. He replied, verse 8, "Watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming that I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them." You know, when there's times of uncertainty, false teachers come out in force. I think we're seeing a bit of that at the moment with the way the world is, and the war in the Middle East at the moment, in Iraq, in Iran. with Israel and USA. You get sort of all kinds of people coming out of the sort of every sort of crevice in society and placing their own opinion on it, both good and bad. And the religious weirdos start to get out in force. And Jesus says, well, don't be surprised if that happens. He points out it's going to be a time of upheaval. He talks about nation going to war against nation. And he talks about earthquakes and famines and natural disasters. And actually, since Jesus has left this world, since his ascension, name me a year when there haven't been wars several places in the world at one time. This is a natural phenomenon as far as we are concerned. In Jerusalem in AD 70, the temple was actually destroyed by the Romans, who had become completely fed up with Jewish insurgents. And so this was very real to the disciples. It tells us two things. Firstly, prophecy always means something to the people who first hear it. It's not a case of them sitting down on the ground and saying, well, I guess in 2,000 years' time, they'll be able to understand it better than we do. They understood it very well. This is why the disciples came to him with this question. And secondly, and this is very important, there is assurance. In verse 9, Jesus says, when you hear of wars and revolutions, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. Jesus' teaching here and over the next few weeks is actually to reassure us. So what's the second lesson for this? Well, think of Psalm 46, verse 1. God is our refuge and our strength, our very present help in trouble. Or maybe Isaiah 41 and verse 10. This is a lovely verse. So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Are you feeling a bit apprehensive about the world and the way it's going? Well, here's the wonderful thing. You can put your trust in God. We're offering up to Easter free copies of Mark's Gospel. There's some on the fence at the front, the railings, or you can come up to me on the street and take one off the table. Thank you so much for listening.